Fantastic. That's what I want to hear. Okay. Thank you everyone for showing up, panelists especially. My name's Casey and I'm the tertiary coordinator for Go Hort. And I'm excited to introduce you today to some very impressive past scholars that have graciously given their time to share their experience and hopefully answer a few questions that you may have or may not have along the lines. So we'll go through a few questions for our panelists, and if anyone's online wants to ask a question, there'll be an opportunity to do so. And if you want to utilize the chat as well, you're very welcome to put your questions through there. I suppose we'll start off with an easy one for our panelists. If you could introduce yourself, your name, your degree, and your favorite part of the food and fiber industry, essentially. We'll start from the person I see on my screen first. Finn, take it away.
Well, I suppose, as you've heard, my name's Finn. My degree would be genetics and plant biotechnology, currently at Otago University. And was last about favorite part of the plant and food industry?
Yeah.
I suppose my favorite part of it would be how much innovation can be allowed for it and how much potential it holds, especially with my degree, the amount that I can do to either influence how something is grown or to make something grow much better in different climates is very exciting to me, because I view it as a way to circumnavigate quite a few of the challenges that will come up soon.
Awesome, thank you. Next up is Chelsea, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name is Chelsea. I just finished a Bachelor of Agribusiness. I think the most exciting thing about the food and fiber sector is the people that are involved with it and the people that you can meet and work with, and also the diverse range of job opportunities. There really is something out there for everybody, and I think that's something I've discovered throughout my studies and through this opportunity with this scholarship as well.
Awesome. Hi, Chelsea. Thanks. Next is Jack, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jack. I'm doing a Master of Horticultural Science at Massey. The thing I find most cool about Hort is growing fruit and the innovation happening in the space at the moment, especially in the on-farm side of it, which I think is really cool. So yeah, excited for that.
Awesome. I love how you're half invisible, Jack.
Yeah,
That's all right. I think it's what you say that's most important. George, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, I'm George. Just finished off my Bachelor of Horticulture Science last Friday, actually. And I think the most appealing aspect of the food and fiber sector is this big shift that we're seeing right now towards engaging with the younger generations, and I think addressing this big gap in the industry, because you have a lot of young people, we've got a lot of young people that are interested, a lot of old people that are in the industry. There's this big gap of sort of 20s to 30s, and that's where sort of we're coming in. So yeah, industry is really open to young people coming in and sort of leading the charge now, which is quite cool. So yeah.
Awesome. And lucky last would like to introduce August, if you want to say your name, your degree, and your favorite part about the food and fiber industry.
Hello everyone, my name is August. I'm just finishing up my Bachelor of Horticultural Science. And my favorite thing about the food and fiber industry is I probably had to agree with Chelsea there. It's just the people that you meet, so many different ethnicities and backgrounds, and a lot of just forward-thinking, innovative minds in the industry, which is really cool to be amongst.
Awesome, thank you. And for sort of our next question, we're going to segue quite smoothly into sort of where you've come from and how you made your decision to study what you're studying and have an interest in the food and fiber industry. So your journey into getting into your degree and what made you choose Hort, and what were the decisions that you made during that process as well that helped you move into that direction, especially if we're addressing some people who might still be in high school and might not know what's really what would be good for them, and what you could say to help them with their decision if they were interested in this industry. I suppose we could start with August because he went last before.
Okay. How I started with, I guess, with the decision of going to horticulture as a career path is that I don't know. I mean, like I grew up in Samoa, and so a lot of like people back home, they make their livelihoods off living off the land, like farming and things like that. And so I think it was just something I kind of just grown up around. And then when I moved to New Zealand for high school and things like that, kind of taking stuff like plant biology and kind of really cemented the idea that like I'm really interested in plants and I'd like to learn more about it. And then doing my degree here at Massey, I started off with ag science. Didn't really like it, moved to ag com because I thought it'd be easier, but it was just, yeah, not as interesting as I'd thought. And then that was the year before Massey had opened up the Hort Science degree, and that was a perfect fit for me. And so went in with that. Yeah.
Thank you. And I suppose we can go next. We can pick on Finn, if you'd like to tell us how you got into your degree and what were the choices that you made coming out of high school or things like this.
Well, before I started this degree, I came from a rural background, so I didn't find plants too interesting in my first year, or well, horticulture itself. I headed up to Massey and took veterinary sciences instead. Afterwards, I took a plant selective paper, and that opened my eyes just to how interesting they were. I learned about plants that could, you chuck them down, they regulate various pathways, and they can survive. They can survive where they shouldn't survive. They have no business surviving, but they do. And it was from this paper that really cemented in me the idea that if you can find out why they survive, it's easy enough to just translocate that around. So yeah, I suppose the decisions I then made to further this degree was I decided where I was very interested in biochemistry and its pathways and genetics, and so I went around, talked to a lot of lecturers. Apparently Otago had a very nice facility, so I headed down to Otago. Otago's also had quite a few people who were specialized in the degree I was looking for, so that was another thing I took into account. But I suppose, so yeah, that was all that. And for anyone who's coming out of high school or is wondering if horticulture is right for them, really, if you're interested in chemistry, if you're interested in genetics, you're interested in biochemistry, that's horticulture. That's plants. I didn't know that before. I really didn't know that before high school. But if you're still unsure, take a plant selective paper. Normally the people in first year are very eager to teach it. That's really what infected me with its with the likeness for plants. The lecturer is really good, so you find a good lecturer, they will infect you with it too. You will, no matter what you take, you will be able to apply that to plants. So yeah, I think that was everything answered there.
Yeah, awesome. No, thanks for that. It's really awesome how you were pointing out how good lecturers make all the difference. If George wouldn't mind telling us how he got into his degree.
Yep. So short and sweet was I did all right at school, but then in my year 13, I bombed. I think I failed 7 exams. So I got my university entrance, but it wasn't pretty. And I think for me, horticulture was a blank slate. So in my final semester, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then my hort lecturer, Mr. McCoy, bless his soul, put me into the sort of direction of hort in the university space. And at that point, I had nothing to lose, so I thought I'll just go for it. And I think from the first semester of university into my first work experience doing kiwifruit, I just noticed that there is such a level of, I think, teachability in that degree, and the industry doesn't sort of have this idea of, I guess, expected knowledge. It's like, like at the ag degrees, a lot of the kids come in from farming backgrounds, and so they have this experience from 10, 15 years on the farm with mum and dad who own 2,000 hectares and have 1,500 cows. With horticulture, they take you as you are. And so I think I kind of came in with this sort of this very blank slate understanding, but within 3 years, I've sort of soaked up so much knowledge because the industry's been so keen to teach people like me who aren't from hort backgrounds or from ag backgrounds. But I think industry values us as much as those who are from that. So yeah, went into kiwifruit for my first practicum, and then my second practicum I did work at Zesbury. And once again, it's a huge company with experienced staff of 20, 30 years, less, but they were just so keen to teach me and really sort of guide me through. So I think that was really cool for me, as someone that didn't have any experience. I got to sort of get led by the hand for these past couple of years. Now that I'm stepping up for industry, I'm feeling quite ready to go in there, even though I've had no upbringing in the industry, so to speak.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing. Can we ask Jack how he got into his degree and has actually decided to continue into a postgraduate degree?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Auckland, so haven't got a hort background really at all. I think at high school, I'm probably the only person ever to do horticulture. So yeah, so not a strong hort background. But I knew that I was interested in applied sciences and working outdoors. I didn't want to be tied to an office in the big smoke for the rest of my life. So I thought, well, why not try horticulture at uni and see how it goes? And it's gone pretty well. So I'm doing a master's now. So I got real into the sciencey stuff last year, into the post-harvest science, and that just sort of developed that interest in me. And I just chose to continue that through. And yeah, I think a lot of horticulture is very science-based if you get up into the higher levels. And I think that by having a postgrad degree in horticulture, you'll be more of service to the industry and be more in tune with the upper level management sort of decisions that take place. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I believe lucky last is Chelsea.
Yep, I'm a bit different. So I actually do come from a dairy farming background. So I've been brought up around the ag sector. But to be honest, I didn't think I'd end up here. I went out on farm, but I was never one to get my hands dirty. I never really enjoyed it. But high school sort of changed that for me. I took horticulture throughout my whole time at high school. I had a really inspiring teacher throughout my time at Fielding High. She sort of inspired me to get into the industry. She could see my interest in it. So I spoke to her about degree options. I was originally going to do a horticultural science degree, but after my interest in the business side of the industry, she recommended a Bachelor of Agribusiness, and then she recommended I do horticulture as my electives, which is what I have done throughout my whole degree, and absolutely loved it and really enjoyed the business side of it. So I'm more the business side as opposed to the science side, but I think there's something out there for everyone. And then I've done 2 horticultural practicums. I've worked at Woodhaven as an agronomist, which I absolutely loved and would recommend if anyone to do that sort of job. It just really opens your eyes to what else there is out there in the industry. So that's sort of my journey.
Awesome, thank you so much. And moving on to our next question that we're going to bring out to the table. What are the biggest challenges that you face during your studies, and how have you overcome that, and whether that's overcoming that with whether it's, for me at least, whether it was the passion for what you were learning or whether it was your support system, and any advice that you would have for overcoming those challenges through your studies. George, would you like to start?
Yep. I suppose it's a whole learning curve, really. So quite a few different things come up. But I think a big challenge for me probably would have been learning how to network and get into industry, because the horticulture sector is so small. It really is who you know, because you know one person and suddenly you know 20. And so I think initially it was quite tricky sort of getting my head around how to do that. But I found that getting involved in clubs with like Massive Hort Sock and then going to events and panels was the big thing. I think my big challenge there was learning to sort of put myself out there and learn how just to sort of talk to these higher ups in industry and, you know, these big sort of corporate bodies, and just try and address them and sort of learn how they work, how they interact, and just sort of put your name out there. So yeah, I think sort of getting that exposure was a big thing. But the moment you sort of get your first taste of networking, you do your first conference, or, you know, your first experience at the whole conference, you know, you really do sort of get the ball rolling, and then suddenly it's just, you're meeting the names and faces like everything, because it just happens so quickly. Suddenly people come to you for jobs, and that's a really cool feeling. And after years of sort of talking to people, sorry, you learn that people actually value and want you in the industry. So yeah.
Great, thanks. Shall we jump it over to Jack?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially from coming from a urban background, is finding your feet in the sort of sector. So I think first year uni, you sort of come in and you're all fresh, and at least to me, I didn't really know what was going on in the wider industry. So I found that reaching out to people through networking events and working jobs for people over summers has been really beneficial and helped to put my learning into context. So yeah, networking comes highly recommended as per George and me, and yeah, it opens heaps of doors for you.
Awesome, thanks. Passing it over to August.
I would say the biggest challenge for me in terms of my studies and finding myself into a job was just learning how best I learn, like trying to figure out how I can best sort of digest the information that's being presented to me and sort of presented back to the lecturers through assignments and exams. So I think that's something I'm still kind of grappling with and figuring out as I go. But yeah, also yeah, networking was really quite a challenge. But the Hort NZ networking event was great. Kind of got me a while to get going, but once you get into the flow of it and start just having chats with people, it was great. It's where I've currently met my current employer.
That's really good news. And passing it over to Chelsea.
I've got two things. So the first thing for me was probably self-confidence, and that comes into the networking thing as well. Coming into uni, I did lack quite a lot of self-confidence, and trying to talk to people and network was not my strong suit, I suppose. But through getting involved in committees and really pushing myself in second year to push myself out of my comfort zone, I've reaped the rewards of that throughout the past 2 years, getting good summer jobs, and now leading into my current role that I'm going into. And yeah, probably the second thing, I did have something else, but I've just forgotten. I'll think of it in a second. But yeah, that's probably been the biggest thing for me, and finding where I fit in terms of horticulture, because I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do. And I think I've sort of, through the papers that I've done and through my summer, and the summer work's been really valuable for me, and my internship this year, just figuring out exactly where I fit.
Great, thank you. And Finn?
Well, I suppose the biggest challenge at the beginning for me would be similar to everyone else was, and that would be networking. For me in particular, I did not have many people who took my degree. And in fact, I think when I first took it, I got told there were maybe 4 people I could find who would be in my classes. I found even less professors. In fact, I think I bumped into more of them than I bumped into more of them by accident than I actually get introduced to. So that made it quite hard at the beginning to actually think of where I could use my degree. The other bit was I got told that there was a place where I could use. South Island's a big place, so that was not all too helpful. But yeah, from the I found that from the scholarship and just from getting out there, meeting people, going to events, I was eventually able to find more and more people who took my degree, find more and more people who were actually working in the plant biotechnology sector. I was able to ask them for advice. They were able to direct me to where I would want to be. So, for example, most of my internships I discussed with them and they said, this one's a good idea or this one's a bad idea for your career. That was very helpful. So networking absolutely was the biggest challenge to begin with, but as soon as you get out there, it became much easier. The other slight difficulty I faced at sometimes would have to be the passion for what I was doing, because while I would learn a lot about plant systems, while I would learn a lot about how to make them better, it was hard for me to stay focused when I couldn't think of how I'd ever apply it. You could teach me all about cell division all day, but if I can't apply it anywhere, I'm probably not going to remember it. So I got around that by through reading enough papers. I was able to find out that actually cell division, the various cycles a plant goes through, are able to, if properly regulated, make them essentially indestructible. And that was of great interest for me because my interests are in growing plants that I don't want to have to pay attention to, or at least that was an interest for me for a while, because I'd grow plants, I'd forget about them and they die, and I'd have to repeat that process. But an interest to me is to stop that process, grow plants, forget about them, and come back to find big trees one day. So that was another one.
Awesome. Thanks, Finn. You're sort of cutting out through at the end there, but I think we got the gist of it. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, guys. And I suppose right now I just want to sort of get from each of you one really positive thing that you took away from going to the HortNZ conference. And that could be a learning, it could be a certain experience, it could be meeting a certain person, or just the one thing that you really took away from your conference experience. And I suppose we can start with Chelsea.
Yep, I think, and I found this really valuable throughout the whole thing of it, connecting with other young people within industry. I think from my experience, there's a lot of, very established people in industry that are a little bit older than what we are. So it was really cool to see and connect with others that are not too much older than us and see their experiences, how they got into industry. And so, yeah, just really empowering us as young people to feel like that we can fit within this horticulture industry. So that was really cool to see, and valuable, really valuable going forward.
Thanks, Chelsea. George?
Big highlight would have been the HortNZ Youth sort of program conference the day before the main conference, and that was organized by myself and Emma and Hamish, and that was just like it was full on, but it was so cool, I think, to be a part of a space of so many driven young young people, and I think it was quite cool in that sort of environment, because we sort of could see people sort of stepping forward into roles of leadership they perhaps weren't used to. So I think, that was a real big highlight. And then especially the speakers too. So the range of speakers we had, but about different topics, about sustainability, climate change, women in hort, a whole big sort of range of topics there. And it was really cool seeing, I guess, the conference address all those different sort of aspects of the sector.
Thank you. August?
I had to agree with the other two that sort of brainstorming youth networking event prior to the actual conference itself was awesome. Seeing everybody sort of put their minds together to sort of address the problems that we were given was really cool. And yeah, probably the biggest highlight really is just seeing firsthand how youth are coming more into like the focal point of what Hort NZ's focus is being, and it's just like I've never been a better time to get into the industry.
Thank you. Finn?
For me, it was meeting the various growers and hearing both what their problems were and what solutions they have tried to fix their problems. This I found very this I was very grateful to find, because it gave me a nice direction as to where I could possibly contribute my efforts. For example, I think I'd often hear from some of the cherry growers up there how their cherries were either they had either had issues of flowering, or they were semi-permeable, so if rain occurred, they just swell up and they would not be nice. So that got me thinking, what if I was able to do this? What if I could breed them like this? And I think for a few of my suggestions, they already said, you know, we tried that for 20 years, wasn't going to work. That's just something I don't have to think about anymore. Something that if I meet another cherry grower, I know I don't have to bring that up because it's already been tried and tested. So yeah, meeting the growers for me was very helpful.
Thank you. And Jack?
Yeah, I thought the biggest bonus of that conference was meeting the mix of people there, because there was people who were not from Massey, so you had your young professionals, young growers were there, Lincoln Uni was there. There was such a mix of people, especially young people, and their passion and their drive and they're just really high level people, and it's great to mix with them as a uni student, and you can see it puts your university experience in context as to what you can use your degree for in the future, and it was really insightful.
Thank you. And I think that's everyone for that question. And for our sort of final question to top off all the awesome things that we've been hearing tonight is, why can you recommend undergraduates or postgraduates to go for scholarships, and in what way did that help you study? And you could start your answer by saying you should go for scholarships because blank blank blank, but answer it how you please to answer it. I guess we can start with George.
Yeah, I think definitely the financial backing is always so valuable. So it meant that I actually haven't had to work. I haven't had to pick up a job for the past 2 to 3 years of my degree, because I've had sort of that support from Hort NZ and also from my other scholarship from Zespri. I think it does sort of take off the strains that you can focus on sort of events and you know, your networking and being a part of ministry, but also your grades as well. But I think the main thing with the scholarships is the opportunities. Having scholarships to your names gives you a certain level of credibility, and also allows for conversation. So you can yarn with someone from an industry because you might have a scholarship to that company. And so even if you haven't ever met that person before, because you have some tie to that company, it gives you a really, really good way to sort of get to meet them and get to know them. So I think financial support aside, definitely the opportunities that come with the name of having a scholarship, you know, like especially Hort NZ is such a recognized, or it is the recognized name in horticulture sector. Being known as a graduate or recipient of that scholarship does give you a lot of kudos, I suppose. You're sort of yarning with the big higher ups in industry.
Thank you, George. Chelsea?
I would say that I honestly, when I first applied, I was unsure whether I would ever get this opportunity. I thought, coming from a farming background and being a Bachelor of Agribusiness student, I would never, and I'm so thankful for the opportunities that I've gotten along with the scholarship, the professional development opportunities I've developed myself, and of course the financial backing has just been amazing. Yeah, so I'd just say go for it, because you honestly never know what's going to happen, and there's so many benefits from having it.
Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I think that you have to apply for these scholarships if you're doing postgrad in horticulture, because yeah, they're so valuable, especially if you're looking for research funding. So this scholarship's given me confidence as I've been looking for some funding. So it's taken the pressure off having to find someone to back my project. And that's also meant that I haven't had to find a job in the last year or so. A second benefit, it links you to the industry and sort of acts as a bridge between your study and the job. So yeah, so it just links those two, and really, yeah, it sort of shows where your research would fit in the sector that you're researching for. And to build on that, it confirms that your skills and knowledge that you develop during your degree or your thesis or whatever, that they're demand directly to the sector you're working for. And yeah, if I didn't think that I would get the scholarship when I first applied for it, but I wrote the application out, and it's always good to update your references and whatnot. So yeah, it's a great thing to have in the bank.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack. I love the tips on how to update your references. I suppose it's always important. August?
Yeah, receiving the scholarship was a bit of a surprise for me as well. I didn't really think I'd get it. My grades aren't the flashiest out there, but yeah, you got to apply for these scholarships because it will open your mind up to the range of possibilities out there in the industry, and it'll allow, like what Jack said, it'll put into context what you've learned throughout undergrad or postgrad, and allow you to see and think about where you could fit in the industry. And yeah, you just gotta do it.
Thank you. And lastly, Finn, why should students apply for the scholarship? Is Finn with us?
Well, what George said, I think I'm alive with you.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, well, similar to what George said, getting the scholarship itself does lend a lot of credibility. It shows that you've put it into your degree. It shows that you have gone out of your way to seek gone out of your way to seek opportunities for the scholarship itself, and also where it can lead you are areas that you previously wouldn't have thought of going. For example, the scholarship took me to Mystery Creek. I'd never heard of Mystery Creek. And the vast area surrounding there, but I now know that's quite the center for horticulture. There's quite a lot of opportunities over there. So whenever I seek a job or whenever I seek a new internship, I've now got one more area in mind. And yeah, so there's nothing to be lost from applying for a scholarship. Worst comes to worst, you don't get it, you can apply again. Best comes to best, well, you get a solid grant and you get to go new places.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's sort of the end of our questions for this evening. I'd like to now sort of open the floor for anyone who is online with us at the moment, if they'd like to ask any questions around our scholars' experience or their journeys or anything along that line.
I have a question. Kia ora. Thanks all for doing this panel. It's been really awesome. My question is, what are your next steps from now on?
Do you want to hear from anyone first, Emma? You can just pick on anyone.
That's cool because you know that I have no job lined up right now.
I'm literally just going around my screen, but what are your aspirations like immediately and then for 5 years out?
Yeah, so immediately I'm not too sure. Currently I'm doing trapping out in the bush. So I just get to go out hiking all day long up in the Tuatee catchment, which is really, really cool. And that's quite nice. Sort of can do that work for a bit as a break. I am also on a internship right now for NZ, as you know, because you're my boss, which is also good because it sort of leaves me with one foot in the pond, which is really, really cool. But yeah, I think the cool thing is of Hort is there's no rush. There's no rush to sort of run into industry and picking a job that sort of comes your way. So I've actually said no to a few offers. I've actually stepped back from a few different opportunities because it wasn't for me. And that wasn't me being picky or me being greedy. That was me, I think, taking the time to work out where I want to be and sort of try and structure my career so that in 5 years' time, I can map myself out. So I think, yeah, Hort gives you that chance to sort of just to take a step back, work out where you want to be. So there is no need to pick up the first job that comes your way, because you might get offered kiwifruit picking, but there could be a job that allows you to run those who do kiwifruit picking, and that's sort of the key difference there. So yeah, kind of step back a bit.
Brilliant. Thanks, George. Do you want me to keep picking on people, Casey?
Well, I think this is our question session, so anyone is free to answer the question. So if anyone else would like to answer Emma's question, that would be appreciated to Emma herself.
Well, for me,
More fun.
aspiration for the near future will be to, or at least goals for the near future will be to delve deeper into the genetic testing of plants. Technically, I will be doing work on fungi, but everything else there I can all the skills I will get from, it's a lot of bioinformatics and genetics works, but all those skills I then apply to harass either Zespri or plant and food research with, and eventually find a place in them that I can apply it to. Aspirations past that, I know I'm eyeing up some cultivars that I want to genetically modify in the future. I'm looking at a potato, thinking I can do something with a potato. That's really about me for now.
That's really cool. Can't wait to see what you do with potatoes. I'd like to really hear from Jack if he'd like to share what he hopes to do with your post-harvest research and where you hope to put that, or where your career is going to land ideally for you.
Yeah, so next week I'm starting my thesis, which is on blueberries and post-harvest. But long term, or maybe medium term, in about 6 months or so, looking to find a job, which is the big question. Honestly, that's the hardest question of all, because there's so much to choose from in horticulture. A few weeks back, I went up to Hastings with Ag First on a consultancy sort of day in the life thing, and I found that to be really cool. So I might look into that. So yeah, I don't know, the world's my oyster pretty much.
World's your oyster, yay! That's awesome to hear. Would anyone else like to share and to answer Emma's question?
I suppose I'm one of the ones that hasn't. So I've managed to land an environmental consultancy job at Ag First. So that's where I'm going to be for the near future. I interned there during this year, so that experience was particularly valuable. It's going to be mainly agricultural based, but I really would like to move into the horticulture consultancy space eventually, but this opportunity presented itself. I turned down a couple of other offers, but this is something that I think could lead to what I want to do in the end, which is horticultural consultancy. But we've got to get my foot in the door and start somewhere. So this is me for now.
I suppose I better jump now that I'm the last person. I guess in the next 5 years for me, I've just started a job as a grower agronomist over at Lewis Farms in Levin. I'm on day 2 at the moment. In the next 5 years, I'd like to really get very familiar with the hydroponic systems that they use and really know that like the back of my hand, and possibly do some postgraduate study. Would like to do like a project understanding the viability of making a cocoa coir fiber industry in Samoa for exporting to New Zealand, because currently most of our fiber comes from like places further away like Indonesia and India. So yeah.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Emma, for your question. And I think those were some really cool answers. And I love how some people on the panel are doing quite similar degrees, that they've actually gone completely sideways into completely different things. And it sort of just illustrates the diversity that you have with your choice. And it was quite shocking to hear that a lot of you have actually turned down a lot of offers, which doesn't happen in a lot of industries. Not today, not that I've heard of at least. I'd like to check if anyone else online has a question.
I've got one. I'll turn my camera on, even though I'm just tired lying in the bed. I suppose it's not necessarily for everyone else. I suppose it could be for everyone as well, someone that wants to answer. But like, what's the most important part of like the application process? Like, what is being looked at, and what did you guys have to get organized and sort of, you know, write about or submit and all that sort of thing? You know, what's the criteria and all that sort of thing? Yeah, I suppose it's a lazy question, so I could probably look that up somewhere. But while I'm here, thanks.
I think I'm probably the best to sort of answer what this year's application process will look like. First and foremost, Aiden, you'll have to go online to find the application form, and it's basically a form that you fill, and some information that you might need to know beforehand is things like your GPA or your NZQA grades if you are a high school leaver, but we know you're not. So having your GPA handy would be good, and having an unofficial academic transcript handy as well, that is usually downloadable from your student portal or from any university that you go to. And all you have to do is fill that form in, and there'll be some contact details. There'll be a section where you can talk a little bit about yourself to help the committee sort of understand who you are and what your motivations are, and as well as provide the contact details for a few references as well. And while we're on the topic, just for anyone online and anyone who might be watching the recording in the future, I'm just going to give you a few facts that you should know about your application process. The closing date for both postgraduate and undergraduate scholarships is the 10th of December, 2021. So about a month's time from now. And both applications are through the online form that we just discussed. And there are links in the Zoom chat if you're online right now to click on those application forms, or would lead you to a job board that can lead you to the application form as well. And if you're online on GoHort or in any of the social medias or on HortNZ websites, all the information will be on there as well. And just a quick spiel on the undergraduate scholarships. You can be a school leaver going into tertiary education, as we've mentioned. You'll just need to provide your NZQA grades. Another point is the undergraduate scholarships this year are divided into regions, and you can apply for a region if you have had schooling in that region for 3 years or have worked in that region for a year. But if you can't find a region that suits you, I encourage you to apply anyway, because there will be scholarships available, especially if you're an international student and might not fit particularly well into any of those regions. And another point from there is undergraduate scholarships. No matter what region you're from, the top 3 will also receive a value of $3,000 from Horticulture, and that value is in cash money that you can use toward your study or your tuition. And for the postgraduates as well, it's the same process. You have 2 scholarships available to you at a value of $10,000 towards your research, and you'll also have to prepare a little bit about what your research is and also those references as well. And I hope that covers most of it. Oh, sorry, Emma, you go.
I was just thinking to add to that, from like a selection committee point of view. So we have a range of growers on our selection committee and myself, and we take all the applications and look at them holistically. and think about the value. The predominant thing is the value that that individual could add to New Zealand's fruit and vegetable industry, and how they are on a pathway that we could help them towards where they could add more value. And so don't feel like you've got a GPA that's too low to get a scholarship, or that you don't have any experience in the industry, you don't come from a background in that, or that you're not studying specifically horticulture. Think about how you want to add value to New Zealand's fruit and vegetable industry, or how you could do that on an international scale, and tell us why we should give you the scholarship so that we can help you do that. We're much more interested in helping people on their journey with the scholarship than we are necessarily in giving it to straight A's. But if you've got straight A's, that's cool. So that's a little bit about like the selection committee and our thinking around that. The other thing we'd encourage is when you list your references, try and find people to be your referees who are from different spaces. So think about one potentially being an academic person, like a lecturer or an advisor, and then perhaps another one being someone who's employed you in seasonal work or summer work, so that we can get sort of a good idea of what you're doing in the industry at different stages.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's very good explanation for it. And yeah, can't stress enough that it's a holistic approach, and that's why we're really trying to highlight the professional development as well for students, and how that could make a difference to your career path, or like Finn says, open your eyes to how many things you could be actually doing on a cherry orchard. And do we have one last question maybe from anyone who's still online?
Go on, Sarah.
What's some advice you'd give to someone who's looking to get a scholarship, who hasn't had that much experience within the horticultural industry? I'm picking George.
I really hate this game. This isn't fun. Yeah, I mean, look, Sarah, I'm in the same boat as you. Actually, you got more experience than I do because you're raised in an orchard. I have no experience. I just came into university. I guess the big thing, as Emma was saying, is that, yeah, it's sort of how can you describe yourself in a way that shows your value, not just now, but from 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. Because as you're both saying, like, you know, it isn't about your grades, really. It's about, you know, it's part of that, but it's also about who you are and what you can do. Because I am by no means a straight A student, but I guess in my application, I must have shown some aspect of what I can do in the next couple of years that would be of value to the industry. Which you know, I think it's important that you do just in your application show what aspects of you would be valuable to the industry. And I know for the fact that you have some very key things that industry wants right now. So as long as you can recognize those in your application, you'll be away sailing.
That was a brilliant answer, George.
I suppose you could pick on one or two more, Sarah, real quick, if you'd like.
Chelsea, what do you reckon for people who haven't been to university yet and they're sitting in year 13 and they're watching this a little bit skeptical, what things would you say to them right now about the scholarship?
Honestly, I'd just say go for it. You've got nothing to lose. Show how, you know, how you, the person standing here today, can contribute to not only now, but can contribute, as George said, 3 or 4 years down the track. Show the values that you've got and what you've learnt from your schooling and what your plans are for your university career and what you want to do beyond that. I don't think, as most of us have said here, most of us are not from horticultural backgrounds, but we have aspirations to have a wider contribution to horticulture in the future. So that's something that you've really got to show through your application, I think.
Awesome, thanks so much. So we're just kind of right about at the end of our time today. I think before we leave, I'd like to do a special thank you for our scholars who have spent the time talking about their experience and essentially about the passion that drives you to do such a good job, not only in your studies, but in other parts of your career and in other parts of the industry as well. Thank you so much for being a part of the scholarships and the scholarship family for the year. And speaking for me and Emma both, we wish you the very best of luck, especially those of you who are moving on and moving into your careers. For the rest of you who are still studying, definitely apply. We will definitely want to see your names in the application list in the next month or so. Would Emma like to say anything before we go?
No, just thanks, Casey, for running this. I think it was really awesome, and thanks to all the scholars, and you'll rock.